You know, I'm not entirely surprised you people managed to afford a house here, but I'll be damned if I let you turn this street into the ghetto. That thing you're building is the first sign of urban decay, and I'm going to stop it before it starts. That's what she said to me word for word first week we moved in. I can still hear the venom in her voice, her lips curled into a sneer, as she looked right past me at my son, who was standing there in our yard, holding a hammer, grinning like he owned the whole world. That was my introduction to the woman who'd become the architect of my own personal hell president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. And at that moment, with sawdust in the air, the smell of fresh-cut wood, and my son's laughter echoing across the yard, I had no idea a war had just been declared. The thing is, it started perfect, almost movie perfect, you know? My wife and I, we'd saved for years, skipping vacations, driving beaters till the wheels came off. We weren't buying just a house. We were buying a future, a place with real schools, a backyard for our boy to run wild, and neighbors who actually waved. Willow Creek looked like a catalog. Lawns like pudding greens. Houses all the same shade of respectable. And there was this stillness. Not peaceful, more like someone was always watching. My wife joked it's Stepford wives with more minivans. We laughed, shrugged off the only red flag, the HOA agreement, a leather-bound monster that laid out rules for everything down to the color of your shutters and the height of your garden gnome. I'm a rules guy. It's literally my job. But this was next level. Still, we signed. We figured how bad could it be. Quiet people, we keep to ourselves. We take care of our place. We thought we'd be model residents. What we didn't get was those rules weren't about keeping up property values, they were about keeping control. And the gavel belonged to a tyrant in a tennis skirt. The first few weeks were blissful. We met a few neighbors nice enough if a little stiff. My son, 8 years old, fell in love with this massive oak in the backyard. He wanted a tree house, his fortress, his spaceship, his castle in the sky. I wanted that too. So we planned it real careful. I even got a city permit, probably overkill, but I wanted it legit. Out of respect, I sent a courtesy copy to the HOA's architectural committee, just being neighborly. Got a one-line reply, received. Figured that was a green light. That was my first mistake. The trouble started subtle. A crisp white envelope under the doormat, our first violation. The grass measured at 3.75 inches over the 3.5 allowed. I stared at that letter. Then the lawn, then back again. Who walks around with a ruler checking grass the next week? Another one. Trash bins left out an hour past pickup. It felt like surveillance. Was that slow-driving car a neighbor or the HOA patrol? My wife started calling the president the Dragon Lady. The name stuck. We hadn't even met her yet, but you could feel her watching. She was a ghost in the machine, just getting warmed up. But the real fight started over the treehouse. We broke ground on a perfect Saturday. My son was bouncing with excitement, tool belt on plastic hard hat, crooked on his head. The whole weekend was just us, measuring, cutting, hammering, making memories. Lemonade breaks my wife, bringing sandwiches. Honest to God, I felt like the best dad in the world. By Sunday, we had a solid platform tucked between two thick branches. That's when the Dragon Lady finally showed herself. She stormed across her flawless yard, small wiry helmet of blonde hair, face locked in a scowl. She didn't say hello, just stood at our property line and spit out those words, "I'll be damned if I let you turn this street into the ghetto." I was stunned, my son confused. I stepped between them and said, "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you're on my property and you're speaking inappropriately in front of my child. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Her eyes narrowed. "I am the president of this HOA. That structure is unapproved. You have 48 hours to dismantle it or we will." And then she spun around and marched off, leaving a cloud of poison behind. My son's voice cracked my heart. "Daddy, is that lady going to break our treehouse?" I knelt, looked him in the eye. "No, son. I promise nobody's going to touch our treehouse, and I meant it." The next 48 hours were a blur. I pulled every document, city permit, the HOA's own bylaws, the email saying received. Our treehouse was under the allowed size, hidden by the oak, and by their own rules we were clear. I wrote a calm letter, attached all the proof, and delivered it straight to her mailbox. Snapped a photo, just in case. Next morning, another letter. This one, clearly lawyered up, citing obscure clauses, calling the treehouse a nuisance structure, and even saying it could be used for unauthorized surveillance. My 8-year-old son, a spy. Still, the 48-hour notice stood. We started asking around. Turns out the Dragon Lady had run the HOA with an iron fist for over a decade, driving out families with fines and threats. Most people just paid up and hoped to stay off her radar. We were the first to push back, and she hated it. Then came the day I'll never forget. I had an early morning briefing at work. My wife was home with our son, who was off school with a cold. I kissed them goodbye, told my wife to keep an eye out. I don't trust her. Famous last words. At 10 a.m., my wife called hysterical. All I caught was, she cut it down. I tore home like a madman. When I got there, I saw the ambulance patrol cars, and my backyard looked like a war zone. The treehouse gone. Just splintered boards and bent nails at the base of the oak. And in the middle of the wreckage, holding a cordless saw, stood the Dragon Lady, smug as hell. My son, bandaged arm and a sling face, white as chalk, was with a paramedic. My wife, sobbing, explained how she heard the saw and ran out, but our boy was inside playing with his toys. When the platform gave way, he fell, dislocated his shoulder gash on his forehead. He was lucky, could have broken his neck. Something inside me broke. I went straight to the officers. She was already lying through her teeth, claiming the treehouse was a hazard. She was preventing a tragedy. The officers weren't buying it. The veteran cop asked, "Ma'am, did you cut down the structure? I was performing my duty as HOA president," she shrieked. He just shook his head. "Ma'am, that's called criminal destruction of property. And since a child was hurt, we're also looking at reckless endangerment and assault." The look on her face, priceless. They cuffed her right there, still holding her saw. You'd think getting arrested would cool her jets. Nope. Out on bail by the next morning, she fired up a neighborhood smear campaign online, painting herself as the hero, us as the dangerous rule breakers. She left out the part about my son being inside when she cut it down, of course. Some neighbors, the kind we'd waved to just weeks before, rallied behind her. "Thank you for protecting property values," one wrote. Flyers started showing up, painting our family as parasites. We became pariahs overnight. It wasn't about the treehouse anymore. It was about whether we even belonged in that neighborhood. The legal battle was just as nasty. The HOA voted to use community funds, our money, to pay for her defense, claiming she acted as president. We filed a civil suit for the medical bills and damages. Our lawyer, a bulldog, told us, "Oh, we're going to own them." But litigation is hell, a war of attrition. They demanded school records, job histories, anything to smear us. Every night my wife and I sat at the kitchen table, drowning in paperwork. The dream house felt like a prison. Then out of nowhere, hope arrived. First, a note on our windshield. She did the same thing to us. "Don't give up. There are more of us than you think." Then a neighbor slipped me a tip about the Henderson case and old board meeting minutes. We dug through years of records and found a trail of abuse she'd targeted. Anyone who stood up to her handed no-bid contracts to her brother-in-law, enforced rules on some and not others. Slowly, other neighbors came out of the shadows, sharing stories of being bullied by her. But she escalated. She went after my wife's job, anonymous emails to her school, spreading lies, twisting facts, calling her unstable. The school had to investigate. Even with her principal's support, the whispers didn't go away. That's when I realized I couldn't play defense anymore. I had to use my 30 years in law enforcement. I invested in pro-grade surveillance cameras, birdhouse porch lights, sprinkler head covered every inch of my property. Then I fed a rumor to her gossip pipeline we'd be gone for the weekend up in the mountains. Sure enough, the trap worked. I watched as she met two scruffy men in her driveway, handing them a thick envelope telling them they'll be gone Friday morning. Full compliance inspection. She gave them fake code enforcement uniforms and sent them to break into our house. The day came, I watched it all live, two idiots in cheap uniforms climbing my fence while she watched from her window. I stepped out onto my porch in full dress uniform, arms crossed, 4 gold stars gleaming. They froze. Within a minute, my officers rolled in, lights flashing. The inspectors were cuffed by my rose bushes. The dragon lady came screeching out, but we had everything on tape. Her paying them, giving orders, the whole conspiracy. When I walked up in uniform and told her, "We have it all on camera," she crumpled. The story exploded, local news, then national. She was everywhere, infamous. The fallout was seismic. The old board resigned, the management company quit, the neighborhood rallied. We rebuilt the treehouse bigger, stronger, with the whole community pitching in. My son's laughter returned. The HOA was reformed, now led by a reasonable neighbor, Frank. We put the lawsuit money into a college fund for our boy, and for the first time it felt like justice. Months later, the dragon lady was sentenced to real prison time, and life in Willow Creek finally felt normal. The kids played, neighbors laughed, and the HOA actually worked for people, not against them. For a year and a half, it was everything we'd hoped: block parties, a real sense of belonging. The treehouse was the neighborhood HQ for every kid. But evil doesn't just vanish, it waits. One day, a manila envelope showed up in our mailbox. She was getting released early. No one said a word. But suddenly she was back, her car in the driveway, looking faded, never making eye contact. But the real threat turned out to be her husband, who started attending HOA meetings, filing complaints about noise from kids, the basketball hoop, anything. Death by 1,000 cuts, all dismissed but relentless. Then the attacks got dirtier. An anonymous call to Child Protective Services accusing us of endangering our son. They inspected our home, questioned our boy, left us shaken. The case was closed as unfounded, but the shadow lingered. Next came a formal complaint against me, filed with the state police board, accusing me of abusing my authority during the original incident. I was put on administrative leave, stripped of my badge and gun. 30 years of service, my reputation all threatened by one anonymous letter. The campaign was relentless. Her husband filing code complaints, IRS tips, trying to drown us in bureaucracy. The house felt like a fortress. My wife was anxious. My son stopped inviting friends over. It was working. We were breaking. But then the husband snapped. One night he looked at me, and I told him, "You're helping her destroy 2 families." For what? A week later, an anonymous tip led investigators to library security footage, her at the terminal, sending the complaint. A recording of her husband describing how she orchestrated it all. That was the end: charges of perjury, witness intimidation, and she was arrested again. Her husband filed for divorce, put the house up for sale. We won again. I was reinstated, our record cleared, and the neighborhood threw us a party. But it wasn't the same. The house felt haunted by the war we'd fought. My wife said, "We won, but look what it cost us." She was right. We sold the house, moved 20 miles out, bought 10 acres with no HOA neighbors half a mile away. My son and I cut the board with his initials from the treehouse and hung it in our new garage, a reminder that home isn't a place you fight for. It's a place you can finally breathe. So here's my question. What would you have done? Fight for the dream or walk away? Where's the line between standing your ground and knowing when to let go? If you've ever tangled with an HOA or a neighbor from hell, drop your story in the comments. And if you believe in fighting for what's right, share this. And let's talk about what justice really means.